Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void were prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Attention! You're listening to the Todd Huff Radio Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk radio. Be advised the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. Here's your conservative, but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
All right, my friends, hour 2 of today's program. I realized I didn't get much into. I just talked around the periphery of the China trade deal workings, tariff liftings, and all that sort of stuff. We did 2 things. Number 1, we kind of explained the groundwork, and there's still some groundwork to, I think, explain and articulate here as to why we're at this particular point. But we talked about Trump's desire to put America first and how important that is. That's fundamentally important to understanding how it is that we're going to get out of this mess and what that looks like. And the level and depth of just mismanagement for decades, the burdens that have been placed upon the American people over the course of decades, coming under the guise of things like feminism and radical environmentalism, and people who have anti-capitalistic tendencies that have been running our government, the bureaucrats, the people in the deep state. Yes, I say that loud and proud. It's without any doubt, it's a real thing. In fact, surveys bear that out. In fact, I saw in a survey, we talked about this on this program, of the people who voted for Kamala Harris, who worked in the government. They were asked hypothetically if they were in Trump's executive branch running a department or whatever, the percentage of people that would disobey a lawful order from Trump if they voted for Kamala Harris, it was a huge amount. I want to say it was 75%, but I don't have that in front of me. But this has all been a burden on the American people, and it has manifested itself in all sorts of ways, including the way that economies, have functioned in this in the world economy today. And it has hurt families, it has hurt individuals. And so that's kind of what we talked about. I talked a little bit too about Mother's Day and mothers and the role that my mom had in my life, and many of you in this audience have had special moms that sacrificed for you as well. Many of you are mothers who do the same thing for your children. And I talked about that as well, since I didn't do that on Friday. I should have done that on Friday. There's so much to manage here. So anyway, I want to talk more specifically about 2 things this hour: the trade negotiations with China, and also I'd like to get to the pharmaceutical executive order that Trump has, I believe, signed this morning. I want to get to that as well. They're related in a sense. They're all related to what we talked about last hour, which is there's a new sheriff in town who is refusing to allow things to function the way that they have over these decades, these many decades, because it's hurting American families and it's not allowing the full prosperity and blessings to be reaped by the American people. So that's where we're going to go today. Before I do that, though, my friends, let's talk a minute about results. If you're in sales, you know that results are what matters. Any attempt to forecast something, those are helpful tools, but at the end of the day, it's results that matter. And Matt Easton and Easton University can help you deliver results. Matt's system is as good as anything, his sales system is as good as anything that I have ever seen. It's practical, it's proven, it's built to sell help you sell smarter, faster, close more sales, make more money than you ever have before. And if you sign up to be a student of Easton University on our website, toddhuffshow.com/Easton, Matt's going to personally jump on a welcome call with you, walk you through your sales challenges, and help you get started. So you got to take the first step, though, my friends. toddhuffshow.com/Easton is where you go. That's EASTON, toddhuffshow.com/Easton. Go there right now to claim your personal call with Matt Easton when you become a student of Easton University. If you follow his system, I believe it's going to pay off. This is good stuff. Take the first step today. You will, I think, thank us later. That's not necessary, but I think you will be grateful for what Matt is able to do for you if you're in sales, if you're running a sales team, if you're an entrepreneur looking to get better at sales. I'm telling you, it's good stuff. All right. So let us now shift into trade talks with China. Headline here, even CNN has to report this. Dow soars 1,000 points. Now, understand when I'm saying this, I'm in, it's before noon on Monday morning right now. And so 1,000 points soaring is what the Dow is right now. It could get higher than that. But CNN's headline from earlier this morning, Dow soars 1,000 points after Trump team and China dramatically lower tariffs. U.S. stocks surged on Monday after President Trump's top trade officials brokered a surprisingly dramatic de-escalation in trade tensions with China over the weekend, dropping tariffs to much lower levels, which some economists say could stave off a U.S. recession. The Dow rose more than 1,000 points, or 2.5%. The broader S&P 500 was 2.85% higher, and the tech-heavy NASDAQ composite gained 4%. U.S. stocks were set to erase all of their losses since Trump's April 2nd Liberation Day trade announcement, which placed a 10% tariff on practically all goods coming into the United States and set significantly higher tariffs on dozens of countries. By the way, that includes China. Trump paused most of those tariffs just days after they went into effect, but jacked up import taxes on China, eventually to 145% on most Chinese imports. In turn, China hiked tariffs on U.S. goods to 125%. The tit-for-tat trade war had effectively stopped trade between the two countries. In fact, I saw over the weekend that there had not been a ship leave a Chinese port heading to the United States. I forget if it might have been Sunday. I might have seen this Saturday. I can't remember. For 12 hours, which is, of course, unheard of. So it had effectively stopped trade between us. And so China, listen, we went through this. I'm going to pause here and I'm going to set the stage. And listen, I'm not an economist. I'm a guy with the microphone who studied this stuff for 30 years, I guess. Talk about this on a regular basis. There are plenty of people that know more about the ins and outs and the details of this than I do. And I'm not trying to play an expert here, but this is important stuff. We all should have a fundamental grasp on what's going on here. I said this from the very beginning. We, the United States, hold the cards. Trump said this more importantly. Trump said this not more importantly than I said it. Trump said, look, this is... we hold the cards. China doesn't have any cards. China needs us more than we need them. And that is a true statement. That is a statement that is rooted in truth. China needs American customers more than American businesses need China. Now, as we've seen, going to places other than China could cause prices would cause prices to go up. Not always, but there's a reason all of the manufacturers, or most of the manufacturers, go to China, it's because they can get things produced very inexpensively, which allows them room to import and mark up and market and do everything necessary to move a product here in the States and still make a profit. So it's certainly conceivable that prices on these items are going to go up. Now, I also have talked a little bit about this. It's been a while, but tariffs are an interesting thing. The person who directly pays the tariff is the company who's importing the product. So they're the one. So when they factor in the cost, they factor in the tariff, and they pay that bill. That's the cost. That's the production cost, the total cost, the cost of goods sold. Right? That's all just factored in into this one umbrella that says that's my production cost. To produce it, to ship it, to get it in here, to pay the tariff, this is what I have to pay. And so these companies have a decision to make. Now, in the long term, I am in agreement that if this, for long-term situation, it seems unavoidable to me, again, as someone who's not an economist, but those tariffs would have to get passed on to the consumer. However, in a short-term environment, that might not be the case. And there's a reason for this. So let's say I used to import things in a previous business. Not a ton, but I would import some things. And once the tariff, once I had to pay the tariff, sometimes the tariff might have been a little bit more than I understood that it was. Sometimes it's complicated, okay? And you have a choice to make. Your choice is let's say the shipping costs go up, or let's say that there's a disruption somewhere and batteries for something go up, 15%. If it looks like it's a short-term problem, a business can say, look, we've got the margin to deal with this. Instead of introducing a higher price point to the consumer, and then the consumer may be inclined to either not purchase the product or to look elsewhere for the product. I'm just going to eat this and weather this storm. We've got enough margin to deal with that. That could be a very possible option that a company takes. A lot of companies may have chosen that because they don't want to see demand reduced because the price has increased. If there's just uncertainty, and if they see it as a short-term uncertainty, then they might respond to it differently than if something is a long-term reality. They've got to change the price then because they're not going to be able to sustain that, to navigate that. They got to think that through and probably handle that differently. And so this was always, for people that are in this world, it was clear that this is a process to negotiate, to get leverage to fix some of these underlying problems. And China, there's a lot of underlying problems with China. China would steal trademarks. This is a big deal. This intellectual property is a big deal. So let's say you discover something, you invent something, you create something, you have invested lots of money, lots of time. You should be able to, at least for a time, own the rights to that idea, that concept, that configuration, whatever, of a product so that you can recoup your losses and actually reap the benefits of the hard work that you've put in. But what happens is China, when they see that something is being produced, that they're already producing on their factory, they know how to do it. I mean, they're the ones that are putting it together. They simply say, hey, let's stop selling it through the company and let's market it ourselves. Let's take these trademarked or intellectual things that are part of intellectual property and then sell it on our own, bypassing the markups and everything. And the market will say, hey, that sounds great. But what you end up doing is you stifle creativity. Advancements will eventually come to a screeching halt because who's going to take tremendous risk to find something that's a great tool for the market if there's no way for them to recoup their costs or to benefit from everything that they've invested, the time, the money, the energy, the lost opportunity cost of not doing something else. So China is notoriously bad for this as well. But China is not a friend of the world. China's a big problem for the United States. And so there's a lot at play here. There's of course, the straight business fight, the fight as to what's best in the best interest of the American businesses, the American people, the prosperity of our people. There's also underneath this, what is, they're a geopolitical threat to us. And we're very skeptical and have been very skeptical of the Chinese for very good reason. The Communist Party over there running the show for a long time. And so by rebalancing trade or finding a way to balance trade, the United States economy at the end of this is going to probably accelerate. And you might see for the first time in a bit, the United States economy put distance between itself and the Chinese economy. And that has implications in a lot more than just trade. That has implication on the strength of militaries. That has implications on all sorts of problems that could come from that. That leads into the discussion of Greenland and the importance strategically of Greenland when you're thinking about people like China, people like Russia, and so forth. And so there's all this kind of percolating below the scenes. Now, China initially, you got to understand the Chinese communists, as I've said on here before, leftists, in order to be a leftist, you have to think incredibly highly of yourself. And when you think incredibly highly of yourself, you are a person from the political left. You think, if you really think that your ideas can solve everybody's problems, if the world was just ruled by you, there would be no problems. If that's how you think, first of all, that's a terrifying way to think, especially when you look at how these people have behaved throughout history. Mao killing millions upon millions of people. Joseph Stalin killing millions upon millions of people. These people who were acting as benevolent, well, they weren't acting as it, they were pretending to be benevolent communists. And what were they instead? They were brutal, murderous dictators. That's what they were. These people are dangerous. The amount of arrogance required to be someone on the political left, thinking that you have all of the world's solutions and that the problems that the world is facing would be eliminated if you were simply allowed to run the show. That's the starting point of people on the political left. Now, I'm not saying there could be arrogance in people regardless of where they fall on the spectrum. But a lot of that arrogance is can dissipate. The impact, the negative impact of that arrogance can dissipate, excuse me, for people on the right because they're not centralizing power. I've said for a long time, Trump is the first dictator in history to try to decentralize power and authority. Trump's the first dictator in history, if you listen to the left, whose main priority is to empower people more, to cut their taxes, to let them keep more of what they earn. It's not behavior of a true dictator. Dictators want to control everything. They want more power for the government, more control for themselves and for the people in inside their inner circle, inside the oligarchy, if you will. That's how these folks behave. Trump, of course, does not do that. There is great things that can happen when we are given the opportunity to keep more of what we earn and to engage in more liberty, more choices, more opportunity. And so China, who of course is a threat on many levels, economically, but militarily as well. China, I think, initially thought, well, because we're so great, we can use this opportunity to simply sell our products to other people, to other countries. And that just, look, there is no economy, right or wrong, but good or bad, I should say. This is right. But good or bad, there's nothing in this, no other place on earth that can replace what the United States consumer does. And I'm not here, listen, you can not like consumerism and some of the stuff about how what America has turned into on that level, but the reality is that is the truth. And so China is stuck. Their economy is faltering. They've needed us to buy their stuff a lot more than we need them to sell us their stuff. It's easier to pay a little bit more for some things. And this is where, you remember last week I played the clip of where Trump was talking about baby dolls. And look, you don't need 30 baby dolls, Trump says. Maybe a girl needs 2 or 3 or 4 baby dolls, but she doesn't need 30. Well, this is kind of the point here. If China's selling things that we really don't need, right? If they're importing us stuff that is really just an expense that's a discretionary expense, then we don't need it. It's not food, clothing, housing, energy. For those things that don't fall into those buckets, we don't need it. Now they're in a big world of hurt. What are they going to do with their products? They've built factories around producing things like this. If these are discretionary products and the country that was purchasing this product is no longer purchasing it because the barrier to doing so, a 145% tariff, creates much more of a barrier to people importing these items, then you're not going to be having any business. And to take matters even further, the Chinese government is in, you could say, in business, in forced business with the businesses there. And so they fund, the Chinese government helps make the Chinese businesses more competitive by carrying some of the financial burden, I suppose, of funding their business operations. And so the government's already subsidizing it. The government's trying to control everything. The government of China is nothing to laugh at. They can be a very dangerous and terrifying group of people. And they're dominating the business community, telling them how to behave. And now the place where there's actually choice involved, which involves trade between us and them, right? Businesses making choices to engage in commerce with China, suddenly that choice is strongly impacted by dramatically higher costs. Now you've got a real problem. And maybe China thought Trump would capitulate. To me, this was also predictable. I don't know what the final thing is going to look like here. I don't know where this is going to end up. I'm not pretending or anything like that to be an expert of what this final deal looks like and so forth. But to think that we wouldn't get to this point is either incredibly naive or ignorant, because China needs us. And they're feeling the pain, and so now some real work can be done. I've got to take a break, though, my friends. Quick time out. Back here in just a minute.
It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome back, my friends. So, going through and looking at this trade deal with China, but this is where this had to end up. This is not surprising. Anybody could figure this out. Anybody could have figured this out. China was going to have to come to the negotiating table. And this is Trump's wheelhouse. You can think whatever you want of Trump and his policies and how he, posts to Truth Social or how he historically has produced or tweeted on X or whatever. You can think whatever you will, but it's really hard to say that this is not what Trump's good at. You have to give credit where credit is due. Trump is masterful at this. He's isolated China through this. You know, it's so fascinating to watch. And I think that this is there's always more than meets the eye with Trump. I think that he's thinking ahead. And I'm sure there are meetings and conversations and strong emotions that sometimes are happening behind the scenes in the White House. And Trump decided that, I mean, he could have, if the purpose here was to isolate China, he did it in such a way that it didn't look that way at first. China was the biggest player, but Trump was doing this with everybody. And so you have trade deals or, people that are trying to negotiate here and there and all this stuff happening. And then you just see in the background, or with everything going on, Trump dialing up the pressure on China. He did this in a way that didn't look like necessarily he was just focusing on targeting China. And I don't think I think in one way he might have been just targeting China all along, because this is the biggest offender, the biggest problem, the biggest threat. But I also believe that this is a problem he fundamentally disagrees with how the United States has been dealt with around the world. The burden placed upon the American taxpayer, as I talked about in the previous hour of this program. That's what's going on here, and it's a marvelous thing to behold. And for people who don't understand this, I understand if it's just something that's new, or if you've bought into the fear of the whole thing, the uncertainty. I understand that. I didn't know, and listen, we're not done with this yet. A lot of things can still happen, but we've made progress, right? We've made significant progress to the point to where this is, we've got Besant, and we've got some things that are beginning to come out of this, and there appears to be light at the end of the tunnel. The markets are responding favorably. People feel like they can take a deep sigh of relief. So I'm going to go back to the article, CNN.com. It says here, another key element of the discussions, Besant said, that's Scott Besant, said the U.S. and China had put in place a mechanism to avoid raising tariffs on each other again, suggesting that the worst of the trade war may be behind us. Now, it's interesting. If the worst part is behind us, how much of it actually impacted you? How much of it truly impacted you? I'm guessing for the majority of us, unless you were an importer or something like that, that's a different story. But for most of us, we were dealing with the psychological impact of this, the fear element. It wasn't so much that a lot of this even materialized in real life. It was that, okay, where's this going to go? How long is this going to last? How much more expensive are things going to be? What's this going to look like in 30 or 60 or 90 days? The markets are uncertain. Maybe your portfolio took a hit, but it sounds like all the losses that have happened since Trump made these announcements back on April 2nd have been, we're 5 weeks later, and now we're back to where we were, but we're in a better position with China here and with other countries, may I say, around the world as well. So, this is Henry Allen, a strategist at Deutsche Bank. He said this in a note to investors this morning. This is again reported by CNN.com. There are still lots of factors, I should say, pointing away from a global recession. And this morning's news of lower U.S.-China tariffs adds to that evidence. The market's resilience itself is making a recession less likely by easing financial conditions, and policymakers don't want a downturn or market turmoil either, as we saw with the 90-day extension of the reciprocal tariffs. So, listen, I think talks of a recession, first of all, they didn't talk about a recession when Biden actually had one. I think talks of a recession are blown way out of proportion. What we're dealing with, the reason we saw a reduction in GDP, at least a portion of that, was because federal spending had decreased and imports increased. All those things are factors in the GDP. Federal spending, by cutting federal spending, that actually hurts your GDP number, which is what we did, which is a good thing for the American people. It was a 5 or 5.5% cut in federal spending. That's unheard of. That doesn't happen in normal circumstances, my friends. And on top of that, the imports, people were importing more to avoid the tariffs that were coming, and having more imports than exports also hurts a country's GDP. And so those two factors were at least big contributors as to why we had a negative first quarter GDP, and you need 2 consecutive negative quarters in order to technically be in a recession. And it's arguable, I don't know, I'm not an economist, but it's arguable that those two things alone might have, I don't know the numbers, but we were only at negative 0.3, I think. So we might not even have been negative without these factors. I don't know, but you can tell that people are optimistic about the economy. They're optimistic. They're confident in what's being done here. They see a light at the end of the tunnel. Going back to the article here, as a result, Wall Street cheered Monday morning. Investors showed greater appetite for riskier assets, including stocks. The dollar rose 1.2% against a basket of currencies. U.S. oil, which had tumbled as investors feared a demand vacuum because of a tariff-induced global recession, surged 3.4% to $63 a barrel. That's always a two-edged sword, but with the oil prices. But $63 a barrel is a lot less than it was when it was, of course, under the Bidenomics economy. Anyway, so there's positive responses. People see that, hey, this is a temporary problem. It appears to be headed in the right direction. It seems as though we're going to get ourselves through this problem, and we might be better off than we were before. That's the conclusion that investors are making. That's the conclusion I would encourage you to make, because I think that's where we are headed. Now, I had mentioned as well, and I'm at the end of this segment, so I'm going to at least read this to you. Trump he was supposed to sign, I think he did, I just haven't been able to see it since I've been doing the program this morning, but had stated he was signing an executive order today on prescription drugs. And I want to read, this is a Truth Social post that he made. He made this, last night, 6:22 p.m., just prior to the Pacers game. But he said this: for many years, the world has wondered why prescription drugs and pharmaceuticals in the United States of America were so much higher in price than they were in any other nation, sometimes being 5 to 10 times more expensive than the same drug manufactured in the same laboratory or plant by the same company. It was always difficult to explain and very embarrassing because, in fact, there was no correct or rightful answer. The pharmaceutical/drug companies would say for years that it was research and development costs, and that all of these costs were and would be, for no reason whatsoever, borne by the suckers, Trump says, of America alone. Again, this falls into the same bucket, under the same umbrella, into the same bucket that we've been talking about throughout this program today. So that cost will be borne by the suckers of America alone. Campaign contributions can do wonders, but not with me and not with the Republican Party. We are going to do the right thing, something that the Democrats have fought for many years. Therefore, I am pleased to announce that tomorrow morning, that would have been this morning, in the White House at 9 a.m., I will be signing one of the most consequential executive orders in our country's history. Prescription drugs and pharmaceutical prices will be reduced almost immediately by 30 to 80%. They will rise throughout the world in order to equalize and, for the first time in many years, bring fairness to America. I will be instituting a most favored nations policy whereby the United States will pay the same price as the nation that pays the lowest price anywhere in the world. Our country will finally be treated fairly, and our citizens' healthcare costs will be reduced by numbers never even thought of before. Additionally, on top of everything else, the U.S. will save trillions of dollars. Thank you again for your attention to this matter. Make America great again. Quick timeouts necessary here, my friends. Back here in just a minute.
Ryan Seacrest here. When you have a busy schedule, it's important to maximize your downtime. One of the best ways to do that is by going to ChumbaCasino.com. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino games like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire that you can play for free for a chance to redeem some serious prizes. So hop on to ChumbaCasino.com now and live the Chumba life. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome back, my friends. Final segment of today's program. Covered a lot here today. Got one more thing. I want to continue what I talked about last segment in this final segment of the program today. But my friends, before we venture down that path, you know what's crazy? We spend more time taking care of our cars in many cases than we do taking care of our hearts. We do things like change the oil, rotate the tires. Those are good things, by the way. I'm not telling you not to do those. We try to keep everything running smoothly. But when it comes to our health, sometimes we just kind of wing it. That's why I have started taking Solti. It's an all-natural, clinically proven dietary supplement that lowers cholesterol safely. There's no prescriptions. There's no doctor visits. Just 2 Solti soft gels a day. It's not a drug. But that doesn't mean it doesn't work because science has spoken on this, my friends, and the research has shown that it lowers cholesterol. Folks, your family depends upon you. Your business, your community, your church all need you. America needs you in this fight. Don't put it off. Start taking care of yourself today. Go to Solti.com. Use promo code Todd, and you will save 50% off your first 3-month supply and get free shipping. It's very affordable. It's a great place to start. Solti.com. Promo code Todd, and that's spelled S-O-L-T-E-A, Solti.com, S-O-L-T-E-A.com. Promo code Todd gets you those special prices and the free shipping. Check it out today, my friends. All right, so I read for you before the break Trump's announcement on Truth Social regarding this executive order he signed regarding prescription drugs and pharmaceuticals here in the United States. Now, there's a lot of questions I have here, but let's talk about the part of this that just, I guess, kind of highlights what's been happening. Pharmaceutical companies, if you buy a drug here in the United States, the drug is, I hesitate to use the word always because I suppose there could be an exception, but I would say in general, the drug is more expensive here, sometimes dramatically so, than where it is elsewhere. Now, why? Why? Now, this is something I'm going to go back into my memory bank and tell you, just from a practical manner, not as an economist, but what is it that makes something worth something? I remember listening to Rush, and he would say, what determines the factor that determines the price of something is the ability of people to pay for it. And so if you value something at a certain amount and you value and you have the means to pay for that amount, then that becomes the value. And pharmaceutical companies, they know this. Now, there's a lot of factors here, too. There's things like research and development is a real thing. But if you're researching and developing a product, a drug, that you're going to sell in other countries, why is it only impacting the costs of the drug as it's the American version of the drug? It's the same drug. I mean, maybe there's some exceptions here and there. Again, I'm not in that industry. But just in general, you would think that if you were going to talk about the cost of researching and developing a drug, it wouldn't just be paid for by the American consumer. Why? It's because the American consumer, it has been determined, can afford to pay for it. And then we start looking at why. Why can the American consumer afford to pay for it? Well, because we have kind of a ridiculous way that we do healthcare costs and health insurance in this country. It's kind of a mess, to be quite honest. And look, I'm not saying that there's not legitimate things. I don't know, getting something approved by the FDA is a lot more difficult than it is in other places. In fact, I used to work with companies who were approving drugs, and they would start, sometimes I believe they would start the drug elsewhere because it was a longer, more tedious, more expensive process to get it approved in the United States, which that's another factor and problem. Maybe there's something we can do about that. Again, you don't want to make it to where something becomes unsafe, but is it really necessary to make it as expensive and as tedious as it becomes? Bottom line here, the United States is again, by these healthcare, these pharmaceutical companies, is viewed as the cash cow. This falls into the same bucket, under the same umbrella we've been talking about all day. If you want to understand Trump's second term as president, understand his perspective that America first means we are not going to be taken advantage of. And listen, I don't know how this all will play out, if this sort of thing can this be done? Are there workarounds? Are there ways for these companies to get around this? What can Trump really do? I don't know. But the logic of what he's saying here is sound. We shouldn't be paying more than everybody else. Why is this the case? Why are you punishing the people? Many times companies that are here in our country. See, we assume, people think, well, the insurance company pays for this, but that's not really the case. We're all paying for insurance, or the government subsidizing insurance through tax dollars, and then that's paying for this, but the price tag is higher. Still comes down on the American consumer too hard. I admire what he's trying to do here. That's what he's trying to do right now. We'll see how this all plays out. I'll get you details as time goes on, but I got to go. SDG.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on chumbacasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at chumbacasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's chumbacasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.